At the end of last week's episode, Father Philip was fetching us a special treat.
This is not a very marvellous, intricate reliquary, but...
So this is a part of the true cross
of our Lord Jesus Christ, and it's from the same relic that is in Walsingham, because I told you the friendship of my predecessor and the vicar of Walsingham, and it was said that they would sit in the vicarage there late into the night cutting relics into ever smaller pieces.
It's been arranged into a cross. So you've got two splinters that have been arranged into a cross.
That's right.
Yeah.
And on Good Friday, we have this, and part of the ceremony on Good Friday, people come up and kiss this relic.
And is that heavy?
No.
Can I?
Yeah, but it comes in two parts.
Okay, well, okay. Oh, no, it's very light.
Yes. We need a new reliquary, actually, so if any of your viewers are feeling generous... This is the Lady Chapel, but also doubles as the Sacrament Chapel.
Oh, what does that mean?
Well, the Blessed Sacrament, the body of Christ, consecrated in the Mass, is some of those wafer breads are kept, and they're kept in that box, which is called a tabernacle.
Yeah.
And you know that it's there because there's a lamp that burns by the side.
Then you've got Charles I.
Charles I, yes.
As a saint?
Jury's out.
Okay. This is always a moment where no matter how high, everyone sort of goes, well...
The Church of England has no official saint-making mechanism.
Yeah.
And so you get lots of names in the prayer book, or in the new prayer book, which are, like Charles Wesley and Elizabeth Fry and William Wilberforce.
Yeah, and you see them in windows, yeah.
Yeah, no one's claiming they're saints, but I think they are people whose lives we admire and perhaps should emulate.
But when you're venerating a relic, like Thomas, a Becket,
yes,
would there be an expectation, as with a Roman Catholic saint, where there might be certain things that the saint specialises in? So be childbirth for St Margaret or whatever it is. Is there something where you might say, oh, this is Thomas a Becket's business?
That's right.
And that does follow through, even in high Anglican churches.
Oh yes, yeah. And St Thomas we have a devotion to because his chapel was in the middle of London Bridge. St Margaret, we have a devotion to her because one of the churches coming under my general area in the parish is St Margaret's Church.
Where's St Margaret's Church?
Well, it was burnt in the Great Fire and never rebuilt.
Oh.
So it was where the monument now stands. So we're actually what's called a united parish.
Okay.
We're the united parish of St Magnus the Martyr, St Margaret Fish Street Hill and St Michael Crooked Lane. It's a bit of a mouthful, and those other two churches don't exist anymore.
St Michael's Crooked Lane was destroyed in the Great Fire of London, rebuilt by Wren, and then subsequently destroyed itself when London Bridge was relocated.
But they do exist in our windows. Here's St Margaret, and she's bursting out of the dragon's belly. She was swallowed by a dragon, and inside she made the sign of the cross, and whoomph, out she burst.
And then the picture at the bottom.
It's St Magnus in the background,
yes,
and it just shows you the monument, and it says site of St Margaret's Church. They plonked the monument on the footprint of the church, so it must have been quite a small one.
I'm guessing this is St Magnus, the guy with the anachronistic horns on his helmet.
This is St Magnus, and he's also in the window just to your left, holding a model of Kirkwall Cathedral, and below is the ruined church on Egglesey where, say, he was martyred. But I told you, didn't I, that there's a church here from Saxon days. He was martyred around 1115. So obviously the church here called St Magnus predates him. So it was to another St Magnus, our original dedication.
This is another saint. There's two St Magnuses.
Oh, there are more than two.
Okay. And this is just one of them.
Yes. St Magnus, Earl of the Orkneys.
Okay.
And I think why it became here was that in 1917, his relics, back to relics, were discovered in a pillar in Kirkwall Cathedral with the skull consistent with having been bashed in at the back of the head with this bit.
Oh, he's carrying his instrument of death.
That's right.
I see.
In one hand, and the other he's carrying a model of the church.
Yeah.
And so, as I say, when my predecessor, Father Fynes Clinton, came, And probably the original St Magnus had been forgotten. There was this excitement of these relics, and so they chose this St Magnus as our patron.
Okay.
And the bishop at the time rededicated it to St Magnus of the Orkneys, but said, don't forget the other one. And the other one, I think, is St Magnus of Anagni in Italy. He was a sainted bishop who lived in the 400s, so clearly came into
so very, very early.
Yes. But again, begs the question, why an Italian saint, and not a well-known one, had a church in Londinium, an important one? Perhaps someone brought some relics.
So this, in fact, is the guy this church is dedicated to.
Yes. Yes.
But that's a relatively modern outcome.
That's right.
And what's his story, apart from the fact he was killed with an axe? What did he do? do we know anything about him?
He was a Christian convert, and when his family were out, pillaging and burning and whatnot, he stayed in the bottom of the boat and read his psalms. And then he and his cousin, Harkon, who was not Christian, were both in line, as it were, to be Earl of the Orkneys, a very important trading area there, with connections to Norway, obviously. And they decided to meet, and each one would come with one boat and 12 supporters, and they would talk about it and, have a face-to-face. Wicked cousin Harkon turned up with 10 times as many, and Magnus realised that the game was up, as it were, and he meekly bowed his head, and a cook was found to bash his head in. So raises the question, martyr or political assassinee? Or a bit of both, perhaps.
I'm noticing the boat. I don't know whether that's...
Not that boat, but that boat.
Which boat? Oh! Oh, yes.
That's obviously a Viking longboat.
Yeah. So it's but a seafarer's saint.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This boat is a total red herring. I don't know why it's there, except there's a little plaque that someone has put here. It says, "Thanks, St Magnus, saved in tempest." And the boat is actually a French sloop.
This is St Michael Crooked Lane?
Yes, which was rebuilt by Wren, and then it was demolished in 1832 for making the access road to what was then the new bridge. But it was falling down anyway, I think it was. And there's St Thomas.
We've got St Thomas here.
Who's holding his scalp in his left hand, because as you remember, one of the knights sliced off the top of his head.
And carrying a sword because he was killed by the sword.
That's right. And then below is his chapel, which was in the middle of London Bridge. Here we have the model of London Bridge.
Yeah. I mean, this is spectacular. How long has this been here?
Well, it was made in 1987.
Yeah, I mean, it looks incredibly authentic.
It is. It's based on an engraving by Wenceslas Holler. That's the chapel of St Thomas in the middle. And that's where the pilgrims going to Canterbury would light their candles, say their prayers for a safe pilgrimage, and then go to Southwark and gang up, and off they went to Canterbury telling their tales. But they might even have been going further, because the pilgrimage route that passes our main door, our front door, goes as far as the Holy Land. Goes to Canterbury, then across to the mainland, to France, through France, down to Italy, and then a boat to Palestine. The clergy always argue. There was an argument between the clergy there and my predecessors here over the money. My predecessor didn't like to see the money being spent there. Thought it should come to us.
They're going in and they're giving some cash over.
Yes, and not doing it here. So there was a slanging match between the two, and the clergy there accused my clergy here of being interested in nothing but fish, women and money. And I dare say they threw some slang words back. Anyway, they came to an agreement where they would give a set amount every year to offset the loss, as it were. We're not on the model, but we would be.
You're that in?
Just here, yeah.
You're not called the parish of Magnus and St Thomas?
No.
What happened to that parish?
Well, Henry VIII.
Henry VIII, it's one of his innovations.
He hated anyone called Thomas. And of course, Thomas also had, of course, humbled a king called Henry. Yeah. And so he wasn't having that. So he had it turned into a warehouse. In 1633 there was a fire which began on the bridge and burnt in this direction, burnt north, burning away all these houses. They were never rebuilt. So in 1666, the Great Fire, which of course started, well, Pudding Lane, just up the way there,
yeah.
by my churchwarden, Thomas Farriner.
What?
Thomas Farriner, the baker, the king's baker, who didn't rake out his oven.
He was a warden?
He was a churchwarden here, yes. This acted as a fire break. So the cinders and all things, it never got further. The fire was retained here, which meant, of course, that people could escape by going over the bridge, which explains why the death toll was so low. Depending on the tide, there could be a 6-foot drop between each side. And so if people were going, let's say, downstream, they would disembark there, walk around, and take another boat on the other side, simply not, to go down what were effectively rapids. And they say that because it could take an hour to walk across because of the crowds, a law was made you had to travel on the left. And then that rule became the rule in the country.
This is where driving on the left started?
As I say to my American visitors, that's why we drive on the proper side. Sorry?
Are they the spots on which traitors' heads were?
Yes, I think one of them might be William Wallace.
Oh, I recognise him.
Heads on stakes. You recognise him, do you?
Yeah.
Let's take a moment to use the power of public domain images to see this unique church through history. We start with this Victorian reproduction of Vingarde's 1543 map. You can clearly see St Magnus absolutely in place, and even St Thomas is in the middle of the river. It's before the Great Fire. It's even before the fire of 1633, so you can see those houses are still there. Note the square tower on St Magnus. When we look at Vischer's 1616 view, there's an anomaly. There seems to be a round tower on top of St Magnus that looks a bit like the tower today. It could be true, and it inspired the current dome when Wren was building it. But, well, that's not what Holler thinks. And this 1647 map from Wenceslas-Holler just feels right. Everything's there. The burned down houses from 1633. There's St Magnus, all ready to burn. The tower is square. After the fire with the present church, you often see it photobombing the monument, and sometimes on its own account. And then latterly, rather more melancholy shots as the new bridge is moved upriver. The old bridge is demolished, and St Magnus is cut off from some of its lifeblood.
Are there any surviving artefacts from the original church, from the pre-Great Fire church in this building?
No.
Okay.
No, it was a total new rebuild. So I think because the old church was so close to Pudding Lane, obviously it was...
It's the very heart, the hottest part of the fire.
The first to burn, and it carried on burning. So if there were any walls left, Christopher Wren's method was to blow them up. And that would cause the foundations. I mean, they always say St Paul's, old St Paul's, could have been mended. Wren wasn't interested in a mend. He had a plan, several. So
he did have several plans, yeah.
So tubs of gunpowder did the job. Miles Coverdale effected the translation of the first English Bible. He was Bishop of Exeter.
So is this before Henry VIII?
The 1550s, anyway. And he was a reformer, a Protestant. When Queen Mary came to the throne, he went abroad for the sake of his health and then came back with Edward VI. Elizabeth was one of his patrons as well. And anyway...
A survivor, anyway?
A survivor.
Okay.
And he was made bishop...
Wasn't always a good idea to write Bibles in those days.
No, it wasn't. Anyway, he was buried in another church in London, St Bartholomew by the Exchange, which was later demolished in the mid-19th century, and his bones were brought here.
Okay.
So he's buried in the far corner under his memorial. There's Miles Coverdale. He would never have worn a mitre in his life, but he's given one in death.
No, I guess he wouldn't. But it's also interesting that he's landed here in a high church setting.
He was rector for 1 year.
So he did have a connection with him.
Yes, as well as being Bishop of Exeter, I suppose to top up his stipend, he was made rector here. And he is The bones, his bones are below there, encased in concrete.
Are there artifacts of the current English Bible which you could say, that's Coverdale's?
Well,
influence?
yes, actually, people without knowing it, if you attend, let's say, choral evensong, the psalms you hear the choir sing are his translation.
Who's this guy behind you?
It's our Lord Jesus Christ.
Oh, that looks a very orthodox sort of representation. Is that fair?
People sometimes ask me, is it Buddha? It's based here on the Van Eyck Ghent altarpiece, and it was put there in memory of Father Fynes Clinton sometime in 1960 or so.
This is a 1960?
And his successor had it covered with a curtain. He didn't much care for it.
How do you feel about it?
Oh, well, I'm used to it.
That's a review. But the surround, that must be older.
The surrounds, both on this altar and the one we looked at, the sacrament altar, were old door cases, because there were two other doors in this church. I mean, one you can see the inside of it there. And these had these elaborate door cases, and that architect I told you about, Martin Travers, had them rebuilt into altarpieces. And now they're on the angle to make them look more continental.
Is that a continental feature?
Yeah. This is the Requiem altar, which, if we're doing a mass for the dead, I will very often use.
And is that a tabernacle in the middle, or is that something else?
Well, it is a tabernacle, but there's nothing in it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But it's also not quite. It's not the shape that you traditionally see.
Apparently, it's Bavarian. Yes.
I see an icon over here, which I'm just going to get a.
Yes. That's
Right.
a Ukrainian icon of the Holy Family. So that's our prayers for peace in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. We've got two Ethiopian icons. Show you the one of St George. There we are. There's St George rescuing the damsel in distress from the devil, which is the dragon. And he's doing it with 3 spears, because he defeated him in the name of the Trinity.
Is that it? That's a modern rendition?
It is a modern one, yes.
But is it based on an older...
Oh, yes, yes. I had this, you always refer to icons as being written. I had this written.
How do you... Is there an icon shop you go to and ask for it to be written, or
no,
do you engage directly with an artist?
In those days, I also had another church, St Mary Ab Church, of which I was priest in charge. And because we didn't have a Sunday service there, we let it to an Ethiopian congregation, and they had an icon writer, and I said,
that looks good.
I'd like one of those. Because we had a sort of cheap old repro one here, and I thought we can do better than that.
Well, I particularly like the representation of George.
And their eyes are large for saints, because they have seen great things. You know, they've seen the holy. And in Ethiopian iconography, you always have 2 eyes, because you can only relate to someone if you can see their eyes. Now, this little character down there represents the devil, and you do not want to relate to the devil, so he is shown in profile.
And the dragon's only got 1 eye as well.
And the dragon as well. And we have the Russian icon, Our Lady of Perpetual Succor.
You've got your stations.
They were carved specially for this church, and 1 or 2 of them have the church in the background. Jesus speaks to the women of Jerusalem, and there's the tower of St Magnus. And Jesus receives his cross in our courtyard. That's the arch of the tower.
I see it. What's the umbrella, the parasol, I guess?
As for carrying over the Blessed Sacrament, which we saw in the tabernacle, sometimes it's carried in procession, and this is carried over the Blessed Sacrament.
Is that a common thing? I don't think I've seen that before.
Well, not ultra common.
Maybe I've just not seen it out.
Perhaps
before.
so. It's a wine glass pulpit, obviously. You can tell by the stem there, it looks like the wine glass. In Wren's day, of course, the size of any church was determined by the voice of the preacher. So his sound technology would be the
sounding board.
The sounding board.
Which is a robust piece of kit.
It is indeed. And you know, they very often say clergy are 6 feet above criticism. Well, I'm 12.
Just as we walk past it, there's a kind of cart in the...
Oh, that's a fire engine.
So this is to remember the fire, I guess.
This is, well, no, this is a Bristow. This was the St Michael Crooked Lane fire engine. Every parish had to have one because the council was responsible.
They were trying to learn from experience. Yes.
Yeah, and you had a reservoir there, then a chain of men with leather buckets. There's St Michael, you see written there.
Oh, yes, so that feels like shoe leather, but very thick.
Well, it is leather, yes.
Yes.
And obviously, you know, from the river or from wherever.
Yeah.
Then you had chaps either side here, pumping.
I'm slightly amazed you've got a crypt so close to the river.
Otherwise, this was one of the burial crypts.
Yes.
And you came down here if you were on a one-way trip, but that is actually a coffin trap.
Oh, what does that mean?
Well, the coffin was upended, lowered, gently one hopes, and then put on shelves. There were longitudinal shelves in this chamber behind you.
Oh, so it's a way to get the coffin down. So it's obvious, such an obvious thing, but it didn't occur to me. Who do you have as a congregation here? Because I mean, there's not many people living around here now.
2 people live in the parish, and they
Really?
and they live in our church flat. So, sacristy. See, this is all I have.
Oh, really? Oh, this is it?
Yeah, this is it. Because you see, this church, this was built, all I needed in the early days would have been a black gown and a wig.
So Father Philip from St Stephen's was saying that the colours that kind of flow through the year at different times, and at an ordinary time
That's right.
it's green and at other
Yes,
times
and
it's...
Easter time, Christmas, it's white and gold, and Lent and Advent, it's purple.
But I'm seeing a golden...
Well, that's because throughout the year there are, of course, always saints' days.
Okay.
And saints will have a different colour, either white. This is for St Anthony of Egypt, whose feast day is today.
Okay.
So if you didn't die a martyr, you get white, and if you did die a martyr, you get red.
Oh, look at this.
Well, the best carving in the church, to my mind anyway, are those 2 panels of musical instruments.
Yeah, they're absolutely terrific.
No one is claiming that they are Grinning Gibbons, but probably they're the best quality. The organ was first of all made, the first organ here,
Yes.
in this church at any rate, made by a father and son, both called Abraham Jordan. But what the historic value of this organ is that Abraham Jordan developed the first swell box in England. So what he did was he took a box, wooden box, put some of the pipes inside it, and then had a louver that open and closed.
So you can raise the volume.
You could swell the volume.
Yes.
Yes. And this was, well, someone had to do it first. This was the first one in England. And organists from all over the country came here to hear this magnificent development, technical development, which caught on, of course.
That's extraordinary. This is the first swell organ. Is this in working order?
It is in working order, though again it needs restoration, rebuilding. It's not in the best order, but we're trying to do the redecoration of the church before we turn our attention to this. You came down the road, that's Watling Street.
Yep.
You came down there, straight across onto the bridge. Hello.
That's a
Roman wharf. Now, you've got a duck, you really have. It's further up than I remember.
It's always further up.
It's one of the College Youths towers.
What does that mean?
The Ancient Society of College Youths are founded in 1637, and they are a bell-ringing organisation, the largest in England, or the larger in England. There had been bells here.
Yes.
And then they were removed during the war, taken to Whitechapel, to the foundry, and then after the war, well, nothing happened. And in the end, the foundry said, well, look, you owe us for rent. But if you don't want them, we'll melt them down, reuse the metal, which is what they did.
Okay, so they're sitting in some other bell somewhere.
In
we
a
know
sense,
not where.
yes.
But I did think, because, I mean, this is old, 1762. So that's old. But then most of these
Are the
look
new
pretty
ones?
new,
Yes.
yeah. Have you got new bells as well then?
Yeah. One of our church wardens, Dickon Love, spearheaded a fund to raise bells, as he's done at St James's Garlic-High.
Yes, I was just going to say.
And St Dunstan's in the west, and elsewhere. The baptism of them.
So when did this happen then?
This happened in 2009. We've got 6 candles and then 4 candles.
Yes.
Yeah. And when we had the 4, those are false stocks, called false stocks. And I was asked, how tall do you want them? And I said, somewhere between murder and adultery.